When I got to the Temple of Karnak in Luxor, Egypt in 1986, the Nile had already receded from the canal quay that once brought the royal barges to its holy gate at the west pylon. The desert sands of 1,000 years had swept away any wood and canvas roofs providing shade. The sand buried many of the towering columns that had fallen, and the few standing columns were pocked and eroded, and perhaps missing most of the hieroglyphics, the stories of pharaohs and heroes long forgotten. The facial features of the rows of ram's head sphinxes were worn or missing entirely. The brightly colored paints that adorned all the statues, all the columns, and all the walls had been totally decimated by the strong African sun. All the gold and precious jewels had been stolen long ago, and nothing remained of the priestly orders that would have taken our sacrificial offerings to the gods to assure victory over our enemy or a bountiful harvest. There were no brightly colored god statues surrounded by the smoke of exotic incenses. The active cult of 2,000 years in this array of temples had long been erased by natural elements and forgotten by the children of many generations long dead. And they really let the place go. Look, hospitality architecture may not be a specialty of mine, but I'm willing to give you guys some free advice. Fix the place up, get some paint, have people dressed up in Egyptian costumes with those big heads, mutely sort of bobbing around and, posing with us for selfies with the kids. Make sure there's some 5G Wi-Fi. You can add a couple of family attractions like a themed roller coaster or maybe a haunted house with like a mummy narrative. And you could put a couple of kitschy kind of air-conditioned restaurants right in the middle of the excavation. It would all be a big success, but you gotta do something. Karnak began as a temple around 2055 BC when Thebes, the Greek name for the ancient city of Waset, became the new capital of Egypt, once the pharaoh Mentuhotep II united both Upper and Lower Egypt. Upper Egypt refers to up the Nile, so it is in fact the southern portion of the kingdom. This is because the Nile flows from the south to the north into the Mediterranean. The old capital of Lower Egypt is where Cairo and the Great Pyramids of Giza are today. As the capital and power of the Middle Kingdom grew, Karnak was greatly expanded century after century. It was an active, vibrant Egyptian temple for over 2,000 years. It grew into a complex over 200 acres, making it the largest religious site in the world. The secured perimeter walls enclosed almost a dozen temples, great courtyards with majestic pylon entry walls, a sacred lake, and more to support a sacred city within the ancient Egyptian capital. Egyptian philosophy is based on ma'at, balance and order, and this is perhaps because they observed nature and saw balance and order. For example, the Nile would flood annually. This irrigated their lands and brought them great prosperity, and the flooding was seen as a favor of the gods. A lot of Egyptian philosophy is still believed by many people today. This is either because we borrow them directly from the Egyptians, or perhaps these concepts are polygenetic, developed by people no matter where they are, because these are things that human beings inherently believe, or perhaps they were shared by a creator. Understandings such as humans are composed of three parts: body, spirit, and soul, or what we might call mind, or that your afterlife is determined by your actions in this life, whether it is your benevolence or the nature of your sacrifices to the gods, or that balance, ma'at, is achieved when humans pursue virtues such as charity, prudence, mercy, and love of intellectual pursuits. It is not surprising, therefore, that Egyptian architecture also embraces the concept of ma'at, balance and order. Large buildings establish dominance, and dominance is a form of order. As their large ancient buildings ascended, they tapered to the top. This lowers the center of gravity, making the structure more stable, more balanced. These immense immovable buildings were, of course, emblematic of the power of the Egyptian kings. And this steadfast tapered form could easily be seen in the pylons, the obelisks, and of course the various pyramids. The pyramid form is still a useful, structural, stable concept when one wants to establish dominance. The daily cycle of the lotus flower, opening and closing, was an inspiration as well, and it was represented in their architectural columns with capitals both open and closed. And the brightly colored paints used to decorate the columns, capitals, temples were not just inspired by the flowers, but often the flowers were the source of the pigment. Egyptian architecture also established order by creating straight lines, which are generally not seen in nature. For example, a path from one place to another would be perfectly straight, and to augment this straightness, it would be lined with rows of statues, often identical to each other. So if one statue was good, 24 statues would be even better. It is fair to say an operative aspect of Egyptian architecture was redundancy. Egypt was eventually conquered by the Nubians, then the Greeks, and then the Romans. But the function at the Temple of Karnak did not change. That is because the temple, as we understand it, really didn't vary much from all the cultures in that part of the world at that time. Temples were very simple. They were a room in which there was a god statue, before which a priest would create an offering, usually presented by a family group. Its practical use as a temple ended in the first centuries AD, when Christianity was spreading. When it became legal, Christianity tended to worship in large groups and not in front of a deity statue. And so temples such as Karnak, with their series of small spaces and their courts crowded with columns, did not adapt well for this new form of worship. Unlike the Pantheon, which was turned into a Christian church, the temple at Karnak just fell into disuse and then disrepair. The Temple of Karnak and the Temple of Luxor are in the present city of Luxor, on the east bank of the Nile. Across the river is the Valley of the Kings, the hidden tombs of many of the kings of the New Kingdom. Like the Great Pyramids at Giza, these funeral monuments were on the west bank of the Nile, on the side on which the sun sets over the Great Sahara Desert. It was an important symbolic placement, as the pharaohs were about to journey to the afterlife. One of the striking things about Egyptian architecture is the proliferation of hieroglyphics. They are everywhere, on every surface. Like Victor Hugo wrote, buildings such as these are a veritable library. Hieroglyphics use symbols for words. In its earliest form, it was not phonetic. What the symbols meant was a mystery since Roman times, until the Rosetta Stone was discovered and deciphered in the 19th century. Of course, symbols as language is a totally archaic form of communication and has no bearing on modern people like us today. Sorry, just a moment. My wife just sent me a text that's all emojis. Just a second, I need to respond. Heart, cartwheel, flaming elephant, football, football, another heart, winky face, smiley face, and a flaming elephant. Send. All right, where were we? All right, back to my original point. Who really wants to walk around the broken stones and ruins of a building that dates back almost 4,000 years? Yes, it's a poignant reminder about how short our time is here on Earth to see the great stones of this mighty temple in this immense empire reduced to rubble. I mean, I read the poem Ozymandias by Shelley, but that's not going to attract tourists. I know Karnak is the second most visited site in all of Egypt after Giza and the pyramids, but what's wrong with trying to be number one? That's why I think they should be learning from Las Vegas. The Luxor Hotel is a good prototype for them to follow. Add some slot machines, some cocktail waitresses in short Egyptian tunics. You'll have a big hit on your hands. Yes, I know in Las Vegas they call it the Luxor Hotel, and yet they've depicted the pyramids and the Sphinx from Giza. But you can't call a luxury hotel casino resort the Giza, can you? I'm Michael Molinelli, and this is Architecture Codex.